What's going on, everybody? Kalip's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the OnePlus Nord N20 5G and the Motorola Moto G 5G. Now, this is not to be confused with the Moto G Stylus 5G, although it does have a really confusingly similar name. As you can see, it does not have a stylus, and it is a completely different phone. But that being said, if you do want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to a bunch of videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability, because this is always changing. But with that being said, let's get started. So with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, we're getting a 6.43-inch AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 409, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 85.3% screen-to-body ratio. With the Moto G 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 81.4%. So while the display on the Moto G 5G isn't bad, the OnePlus Nord N20 5G is really just in a completely different level. With an AMOLED display, we're going to get much better looking colors, and also the brightness and viewing angles are going to be much better as well. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, things are going to be a lot easier to see with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G than they will be with the Moto G 5G. And I can tell you from experience, with the Moto G 5G outside in the sun wearing sunglasses, it's definitely not the most pleasant experience. Whereas with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, although it's still not as good as something like a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, for example, it still is a lot better. In addition to this, with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, we're getting a sharper and more crisp image with a 1080p resolution versus 720p with the Moto G 5G. So if you're consuming a lot of content like videos and stuff like that, then I would definitely say in general, you're going to get a much better experience with the OnePlus. But that being said, the one advantage the Moto G 5G does have is it has a higher refresh rate at 90Hz, whereas the OnePlus Nord N20 5G only has a 60Hz display. Now, to be perfectly honest, I only just recently found out the OnePlus Nord N20 5G doesn't have a 90Hz display, so that really just goes to show how minor of a difference this is. Some people might notice, but I personally really didn't. But the difference still is there, and in case you don't know what it means, a 90Hz refresh rate is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. Now, I don't know about you, but I really can't even tell. Now, obviously, this video probably isn't the best representation of what it looks like, but really between these two phones, if you're doing something like watching a video, for example, I can almost guarantee you're going to have a much better experience with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G. Now for storage, with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Moto G 5G, we're actually getting 256GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now keep in mind, this is the factory unlocked variant of this phone. I'm not quite sure what they're doing with the carriers, so depending on where you get this phone, it might be a little different. But again, for the factory unlocked version of the Moto G 5G, this phone does have 256GB of internal storage. Now obviously, this is an area where the Moto G 5G does have a huge advantage because, of course, at 256GB, it literally has double the storage of the OnePlus Nord N20 5G. So if you're really a power user, if you have a bunch of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, then this is definitely something to keep in mind. But to be perfectly honest, for an average user, you're probably not even going to get close to filling up the space with 128GB. So in that case, honestly, either phone will be perfectly fine. But again, obviously, if storage is a priority for you, then the Moto G 5G might be a better choice. Now, there's no wireless charging with either of these phones, no big surprise there, but for security features, both phones do have fingerprint scanners and face unlock as well. The OnePlus Nord N20 5G has an in-display fingerprint scanner, so as you can see right here, let's go ahead and give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, it's real fast and responsive. And not only that, but an in-display fingerprint scanner just gives the phone a nice modern touch. Now with the Moto G 5G, although it doesn't have an in-display fingerprint scanner, it does have one right here on the power key, so definitely a nice spot as well. Let's go ahead and give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners work really well. And again, remember, both phones do have face unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, we got a hole punch for the front facing camera. And this camera is 16 megapixels. With the Moto G 5G, we got a hole punch as well, except this one is in the center instead of being off to the side. This camera is 13 megapixels. Now on the back, with the OnePlus Nord N20 5G, we got a triple camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Moto G 5G, we got a triple camera setup as well, pretty much the same kind of stuff. For this phone, the main camera is 50 megapixels, and then a 2 megapixel macro camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So again, pretty much the same thing except the main cameras. So as you can see, the features are literally exactly the same, but in terms of quality, I would say the OnePlus Nord N20 does take better photos overall. Now for full photo and video samples, definitely check out my full reviews of each phone, which I will be linking to in the video description. But in general, with the Moto G 5G, the photos definitely aren't bad by any means. So if you're just taking a few photos here and there for maybe social media, for example, then it will absolutely get the job done. But again, between the two, I would say the OnePlus Nord N20 does have the better quality. So if taking photos is something you're doing all the time, then definitely keep this in mind. For video, neither phone is really anything special. Both phones max out at 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K or anything, but I mean, these are $300 phones, I'm not really that surprised. But again, if you're recording videos for a more professional thing like YouTube, or maybe vlogging or something like that, then I would definitely look at higher end devices than these. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the OnePlus Nord N20 we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. With the Moto G 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM as well, with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. Now I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both these phones, and with the OnePlus Nord N20 we're getting a single core score of 683 and a multi-core score of 1972, and with the Moto G 5G we're getting a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1684. So as you can see here, the OnePlus Nord N20 is clearly more powerful, but keep in mind at this level you're really not going to see any major difference in performance unless you go to a flagship phone. Otherwise, yeah, on one hand, the OnePlus Nord N20 will be faster and it'll have smoother and better performance in general, but it's not going to be something like night and day. It's not like we're comparing a Samsung Galaxy A03s. In that case, obviously, then these phones would be much faster. But again, at this level, when it comes to mid-range phones, you will see a difference, but the difference is going to be kind of limited. But that being said, what I recommend doing is running a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on your current phone and then comparing your scores to these to see whether or not one of these phones will be an upgrade for you. Because you may find that while the OnePlus Nord N20 is clearly the faster of the two, the Moto G 5G might be plenty of an upgrade for you already. But overall, as far as performance goes, I would say both of these phones are really fast, and no matter what you're doing on them, they will get the job done. But if you're doing higher end activities like mobile gaming, for example, I would say the OnePlus Nord N20 will be the better option, because even though the difference isn't quite as noticeable as you might think, it is still definitely there, and the OnePlus Nord N20 is still noticeably faster. Now for the battery, with the OnePlus Nord N20 we're getting a 4500 mAh battery that supports 33 watt fast charging, and the Moto G 5G has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. Now there are some interesting differences here. On one hand, with the Moto G 5G, this phone does have a larger battery, and as such it will get a longer battery life per charge. But on the other hand, with the OnePlus Nord N20 this phone has some of the strongest fast charging available, at least to mid-range phones. And I can tell you from experience, if you're in a situation where you don't have a whole lot of time to charge up your phone, this will make a huge difference. And not only that, but while most phones usually come with really weak wall adapters, if they even have one at all, the OnePlus Nord N20 does come with this 33 watt wall adapter, so you can use the full power of this phone's fast charging right away without even having to buy anything extra. So in general, when it comes to which phone has a better battery, it really just depends on your preferences. If you don't mind having a slightly smaller battery that still gets great battery life, then I do think the 33 watt fast charging is definitely a huge advantage here. But on the other hand, if you just want the largest battery possible and you don't care about fast charging, then the Moto G 5G will have a slight advantage. Now another thing to keep in mind is that with the OnePlus Nord N20, this phone unfortunately only has Android 11, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because this is a really new phone and Android 13 is right around the corner, so I'm really not sure why OnePlus didn't give it the newest version of Android. But on the other hand, the Moto G 5G does have Android 12. Now when it comes to getting the newest version of Android as it comes out, Motorola, while not being quite as good as Samsung, is still pretty good, whereas with OnePlus, I don't know why they're slacking like this. But of course, if you do care about the software, the Moto G 5G will have an advantage here, so definitely keep this in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that with the OnePlus Nord N20, this phone does have NFC, so if you like to make mobile contactless payments using tap and pay, and that's an important feature for you, then the OnePlus Nord N20 will of course have an advantage. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? I feel like in pretty much every way, the OnePlus Nord N20 is the better device. The display is much better in pretty much every conceivable way except the refresh rate, which you're probably not going to notice anyway. With the AMOLED display, the colors look a lot better. The brightness and viewing angles, again, if you're outside in the sun a lot, you're definitely going to notice this difference. The OnePlus Nord N20 also has a much sharper, crisper image with a higher resolution. It does take noticeably better photos. It has a more powerful processor, better fast charging, and it has NFC. But all that being said, said, on the other hand, the Moto G 5G does have some advantages. For one, this phone has double the storage of the OnePlus Nord N20, so if you're keeping a bunch of things on your phone, this is definitely something to think about. And it does have a larger battery as well, so if you don't care about fast charging, then as far as the battery goes, the Moto G 5G will have the advantage in that case. So in general, although I do still think the OnePlus Nord N20 is the better phone for the most part, the Moto G 5G is still not a bad device, and it definitely still provides a good amount of value in its own way. But this concludes my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N20 and the Motorola Moto G 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to a bunch of different videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next one.